So yesterday I finished listening to a book called Killers of the Flower Moon by uh, David Grunn, David Grann from 2017, and it deals with the Osage murders. So it's such a complicated story and really, really sad. So basically what happens is that the Osage, like many other native groups in America, were rounded up by the federal government and they were put in the Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma. And they were given, as part of their settlement, the rights to a particular piece of land. And of course, this particular piece of land wasn't very valuable as farmland. That's why they got it. But the treaties neglected something very important, which is that the treaty that they signed with the Osage entitled them to the mineral rights of this area. And eventually, in the early 20th century, oil was discovered on the land. And you might think, wow, that's amazing. And people did think, wow, that's amazing. Those lucky bastards. We put them there because we thought there was nothing and there was something there. And they didn't have to work for it. Despite the fact that we tried to destroy their culture and removed them from their homelands. But yeah, they're the bad ones there. But anyway, so there are all these stories of Osage people getting like really, really wealthy because they had this system where there was like head rights. So the profits from the oil were distributed to different members of the tribe according to how many head rights they owned. And you could inherit head rights. So what happened is a lot of opportunistic white people, men and women, I mean, there was one woman who did this, but mostly men, went to the Osage and got married. And then the Osage just started randomly dying because, as I said before, you could inherit the head rights. So if you inherit the head rights, you inherit this money. And the crazy thing is, like, the Grann talks about it in the book that there's not really a detailed examination of how many people were murdered in this way. The official FBI list is about 20, but the book proves that the murders started before this investigation and they happened after. So there's like a famous case of this white guy named King Hale who kind of did a conspiracy to murder a bunch of Osage for this reason. And he was arrested eventually by the FBI and put in prison, which is really great. But he had a lot of kind of co-conspirators. And there was one guy who had like an entire family. Like he married an Osage woman and had two kids with her and murdered her anyway, right? Or at least looked the other way when she was murdered, which is really, really crazy. And then there was an Osage guy who was doing his own kind of investigation into these crimes, and they decided that the conspirators decided that he needed to go. So they went and they blew up his house in Oklahoma in the 1920s. So his house just randomly blew up because houses in the 1920s were randomly blowing up. Like what? But the crazy part is like that guy who killed his wife, he like the kids were going to go there. The kids were going to go there and like visit that house the day it got blown up, but one of the kids had a toothache, so they survived, which is really, really crazy. So then I don't know how to say this, but there The Republican government generally right now is stupid. And I know that's a controversial thing to say, but Republicans used to be the party of conservatism. And conservatism used to deal with small government and individual rights. And now conservatism is just about culture war topics. So, Oklahoma, of all places, Oklahoma was created out of the ashes of the Indian Territory, so clearly there was some things going on in Oklahoma. Oklahoma passed a law. When was that? Oklahoma passed a law in uh, da, 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 Oklahoma House Bill 1775 in 2021, and it regulates classroom discussion regarding race and gender. So kids in Oklahoma couldn't study this book, which is about their history, because it's about race and gender, and we don't want to offend the white people. Like, come on, Jesus Christ. This was like a long-lasting conspiracy where people died, got murdered, and I haven't even told you the worst part about this whole thing. So it's really bad that some unscrupulous people came to this community to get rich off of this oil wealth. And the oil wealth didn't last very long. It lasted like 15 years, 20 years, and then it was gone because these wells were not the most productive. And now they can't even produce any oil because they need to meet all of these environmental regulations. And the same thing keeps happening to this tribe. A European energy company, I think Enea, built some windmills, and I don't think that windmills are the worst thing. I'm not like an anti-windmill guy, but they didn't ask permission. And when the tribe said, hey, you should ask permission because it's on our land, they're like, we don't have to ask your permission. And they had this like complicated thing where they were trying to say that they needed to dig on the land, and so they own the mineral rights, so they couldn't do that, but the court kind of threw that argument out, unfortunately. But that's not the worst part. I mean, that's bad. Like, the Osage are still treated badly to this day in their own country. Like the complete indigenous people of America. It usually sucks for them, not always, but mostly. But what happened is that in the 1920s, when the Osage were given all of this wealth through random fate and lottery, they were not considered competent by the American government. They were treated like children. So every person well, not everyone, but most of the people who lived in this territory, they needed to have a guardian, usually a white guardian who was a lawyer or a banker. And some of these people had, 10 people who were guardians, and 90% of them died weirdly because the guardian would inherit the rights. So it's not just about like how racist that is, although that's pretty damn racist. It's also about how just grossly open to corruption that system would be. Like, you could take anybody. You could take like the most moral set of people, like 100 strangers, and say, of every like race, religion, or whatever, and you could say, okay, you are going to be responsible for 20 people you've never met, and each of those 20 people is probably a millionaire. So, and if those million people, if one of those 20 people die or have an accident, then you get the $1 million, and you have 20 people under your care, so you could get upwards of $20 million just with a little simple murder. So, oh my God, it's crazy that things happen like that. And when you look into the history of, you know, what Europeans did to indigenous people, you really got to say, man, we should all leave, man. We don't deserve this beautiful place. Um, and I know what people are going to say. It's not my fault. I didn't do that. I didn't murder anybody. That's right. You didn't. I don't know. Maybe there is somebody who murdered somebody watching this. It's a crazy thought. But anyway, I'm not talking like if you really did murder somebody, bad, bad, bad on you. But most people watching this never murdered anybody, never stole head rights from the Osage in the 1920s. But the thing you have to remember about these issues is they're ongoing, right? So Indigenous people in the United States and in Canada, they don't have it easy because of all of the history that came before. You might think the history doesn't matter to you, but for example, residential schools, they didn't stop until the late 80s, right? And I know some of my audience are probably, they were born after the year 2000, but I was in public school in the 1980s. I graduated public school in the 1990s, right after. But like, so the residential school system, if you don't know, basically was a system to try and erase these people's culture. And it worked because there used to be hundreds of different languages in the United States, indigenous languages in the United States and Canada. And now there's a few that still survive that have a lot of speakers like Cree, for example, or Navajo. But there are languages where literally there's only like a few people left. And when those people are dead, the language is gone. And that is a huge, huge tragedy because when languages die, like cultures die. And it was on purpose. Like, that's the thing. It was on purpose and it was happening until your parents were alive. Like, god damn. Like, it makes a person angry, and it should. Like, the fact that this happened. And okay, I didn't really tell you what the first part of the book is about, because that's an interesting story too, but I think that we all needed to get angry about this situation that continues on. And I don't know, maybe if you're a politician, you can do something about that. I don't know. But anyway, so the first part of the book is about the Osages, like this Osage murder conspiracy with King Hale, the guy that I talked about. And it kind of unfolds like a simple murder mystery, and then all of these complicated layers get added to it. And that's the thing that I like about the book. It really, really unfolds. And one kind of disgusting aspect of this was that J. Edgar Hoover, the first director of the FBI, he sort of made this case. He made the case his sort of advertisement for the FBI. And he said, oh, we're modern. We're like, oh, we do all this modern police work. And because they did that, they didn't really do a good job of investigating what happened before this conspiracy or protecting the people after. So, yeah, there were people who went to prison for life because they murdered some Osage, but generally Oklahoma had the death penalty at that time, right? And there was a question like, are we going to be treated like human beings? So are the same punishments going to happen when somebody murders one of us, or are we going to be treated like dogs? And guess what the answer was there? Oh, this makes me so angry. Anyway, it's a good book. It's like a classic of true crime, and it touches on all of those aspects. Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann. It's really worth your while if you want to be educated about a tragic aspect of life in the United States and Canada, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm not going to really promote myself now. I don't really feel like it, but yeah, go read the book. It's good.